What is up, crew? Welcome to another episode of Seek the Edge, where our mission, our purpose, why we do what we do is to challenge you outside of your comfort zone. As Chris is going to talk through today, everything great is usually on the other side of it, so you can tap into the God-given potential inside. And I have an incredible guest today, not to just gas her up before we bring her on, but she is somebody that whenever you meet somebody via social media, you're like, okay, they can portray themselves a certain way, but are they like that behind closed doors and outside of just their portrayal via social media? And I'm excited to get you to know deeper, but from what I've met with you so far, you are the same person in front and behind the camera, and you are very heart-led with everything that you do to make people better and to make the world a little bit better place. And so
Thank you.
we have Chris Shepherd on. She's the co-founder of Life Visions. Well, we will dive a little bit into that and is a functional practitioner with a specialty in metabolic and hormone health. And actually, side note, she's the one that did my recent labs that I did share about in the past podcast. That is really challenging me in a different way of not just pushing hard in everything that I'm doing, but allowing myself to better myself through the hormone aspect and metabolic part, which we'll get into. So, Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, girl. I feel like this has been a long time coming, so super excited to be here and to share.
And you are a wealth of knowledge, not just from your life experience, but also metabolically, that we do have a lot of very driven, not just women, but men, women, everybody in our community, that you are going to throw many of us for a good curveball and kind of give ourselves permission to do things a little bit differently. And so I shared this with you ahead of time, but I want to take this two different ways. Okay. First, I want to really go into more of the metabolic, hormone, that clinical nutrition side. And then I want to dig into your story because I know that led to the hormone part of it.
Yes, yes.
So I'm going to start with the first one. Okay.
Perfect.
Knowing that our audience is very driven, is very go-getter. Okay. They might not all do the crazy stuff that I do, but it is the type of person that we serve. Why is it important to get labs, hormone labs, metabolic labs, and also with the very driven personality type? What
Yeah.
are common occurrences that you see short-term and long-term play out?
Yeah, I mean, you and I have talked about this, I feel like a lot, and it comes to it's super simple to me. When you're dealing with high performance, mind, body, soul, doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't always have to be in the gym and these types of things. Any level up that you're seeking that is a high performing mentality, data drives the direction. 100%. Like anytime you're not going to start training without knowing where you're going. You're not going to be able to determine how to fuel, how you're going to train, what things you're going to do, the time frame of any of that. Really, data drives the direction of anything that you do. And we feel the same way about clinical testing.
Mm.
I think a lot of times people think you test as a reactive step to health and wellness. And, kind of where we're trying to shift the narrative around health and wellness, especially with a functional lens, which is what my husband and I focus on. It's the same. We look to personalizing a journey rather than kind of like generalizing it. You're not going to go in and do the same exact training thing that everyone else is doing. So when we're talking about testing, we look at it very, very the same way. The illusion of someone that is a high performer that's in the gym, that takes care of themselves, that's healthy, there's this illusion of the outside looks fine, so everything else is fine. But you don't really have the data to back up what's going on under the hood. And so when you are able to use it as leverage it is kind of how you look at it. If you leverage that information, that data, it's the level up. It's taking you to that next rung, being able to bust through that next ceiling.
No.
So I would think, and really the things we're seeing the most, because even when we talked, the dysfunction kind of key patterns of someone that is a high performer, where it might not be the same as someone who is really focused on like a health journey or a wellness journey, a more reactive approach to something that's going on symptomatically. Maybe you're not experiencing symptoms at all, but we're looking at like things like metabolic flexibility, which is the key player in what you're able to achieve as a high performer. Okay. So we're looking at oxidative stress. We're looking at your inability to put on lean muscle mass or maybe utilize your fuel to the best of your ability We're looking at things like less energy. You might notice fatigue or that wired but tired feeling. And really getting this metabolic data before you step into anything else is game changer. It really kind of it gives you that opportunity to look for ways to just kind of get a little bit better, to keep pushing, which we know your audience is very, very into for sure.
And we're gonna pull back sometimes. No, and that's actually, I mean, we connected in a different capacity too with helping clients, but I was like, hey, I want to go through this first to really understand what's going on underneath my hood. And I always say, hey, get your blood work one time a year. And also, what I say sometimes is not always followed exactly to a T on my back. And I try to be have a lot of integrity. But if I really reflect back, I haven't got my blood work in the past couple of years. And it wasn't a neglect on my end. It was just like, oh, I'll get around to it. And I haven't got around to it, right? And when I got my labs back, not to just share my entire journey with it, it was a really good eye opener of Kels, you need to double down on this, girl. And I would rather focus on this now than something really not great happen in the future and need to focus on it now. Like let's be
Yes.
proactive instead of reactive. And you said something in there about metabolic flexibility. And
Mhm.
I know from the general public, it's like, yeah, we've heard those words before, but what does that actually mean? So what does that mean for the lay person to
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing and why we talk a lot about metabolic, we believe in the hierarchy of the body. We believe that every system is responsible or plays a key role in supporting a downstream system. Okay. And so when you're talking about metabolic flexibility, we're looking at things that are like very foundational. We're looking at blood sugar, we're looking at liver, we're looking at your energy source, mitochondria, things of that nature, and how they're functioning to allow you to be more flexible, to allow that function to be maximized. So, instead of going straight to hormones or something like that, if that starts to break down, having metabolic flexibility allows you to be exactly that, proactive. It allows you to be completely in the know of how your body functions and then to maximize the returns that you're getting. And so when we look at things like blood sugar, liver capacity, and how you're detoxing and how you're able to recover and how your cellular function, which is like the powerhouse of everything, we're really focusing right there. We're trying to make sure that metabolically we are 100% in the game, winning every day, making sure that we have that kind of foundational piece at play.
So what I'm hearing you say, like that's blood sugar. Obviously, I know from my panel, but like that's
Yeah.
blood sugar, that's liver function, that's
Yeah.
you said the ability to detox. Would you say that that is kind of the main pillar, and that hormones downstream from that? And
Absolutely.
what's your perspective on that? Selfishly, I'm
Yeah,
just curious.
absolutely. Now, again, there's a million different ways to heal the body. Okay. And so we're talking more about function here than we are like one path.
Mhm.
Because we don't believe in one size fits all kind of healing, it gives us that opportunity to really look at the systems and function. So when you look at things like metabolic flexibility, we think one of the biggest things is you first focus on the nervous system and the mitochondria. Is there any oxidative stress at play? Is there large amounts of systemic inflammation that is causing the body to kind of downstream have issues with possible? Then you're looking at liver. We're looking at, is the liver focusing too much on toxic overload? Are we seeing that the liver is unable to keep up with the toxic overload that you're giving it? Whether that toxic load is coming from poor choices, whether it's coming from overtraining, whether it's coming from not being able to absorb nutrients properly. There's a lot of different things in play. And so it doesn't necessarily paint a picture of someone that's unhealthy. It
Mhm.
just paints a picture of someone that, hey, this is where we need to kind of focus. And then you would look at, a downstream from the liver would be blood sugar. When the body can't, when it can't process and regulate glucose properly, which the liver supports that, then we're seeing that constant stimulation in the body, which raises, cortisol levels, which causes blood sugar spikes, which causes also then crashes and cravings and fatigue and brain fog and all of these kind of downstream symptoms that have upstream, kind of starts.
Yeah. Oh, we are speaking the same language. It's interesting. So my background's more sports medicine, and I don't know how much you know about this, but when I was at Ohio State doing more athletic training, great education, right? And I highly speak highly of all physical therapists and everything. But one of the biggest reasons why I'm like, man, I see a gap in this
Yeah.
is if it was a knee injury, not Ohio State, but whoever I was doing clinical wise would focus solely on the knee majority. Or if it
Yes.
was ankle injury, solely on the ankle. And I knew through my experience, it's like, hey, how you fuel your body interacts with how that injury is going to be. How what you think in your mind, if you completely lost your identity because you were an athlete, now you're not and you're injured, that will influence not just how that ankle moves, but your overall recovery. And so
Yes.
what I'm hearing you say, which is why so appreciative that we've come together, is it's a very root cause approach of yes, this thing downstream might look like it's the issue, but let's get to the root cause of actually what is the issue so we can heal that and downstream it will be affected for the better.
Yes, because we look at symptoms as just that. Symptoms are kind of like that red flag of something else going on in the body. And instead of treating it like more of an allopathic model or a Western med model where we just look at symptoms and we look to mitigate the symptom and make the symptom go away, we're more focused on how did the symptom come to be in the first place? And that root cause is exactly where we need to look. And, I think when you're able to understand your body at that level, not allowing someone to tell you what's off, but really truly get the knowledge and understand it. There's so much power in that, especially for high performers that are constantly pushing to that next tier, that next level. It's so important for you to have that education of just your baseline kind of metabolic system where you're at.
What have you seen, Chris, be the big players in influencing metabolic issues or some dysfunction there?
Well, I think it's going to be, we'll stick with the high performer. Okay. There's a it because honestly, I've told you this. I love this conversation because I think it's so there's this misinformed kind of opinion out there that you only test, you only start looking at things when something's broken. And we really want to shift that because if you really are someone who wants to level up and wants to continue to push and pull from your body the maximized potential, you can't do that if you don't understand it at a core level, right? So I think that when we're talking about high performers, number one, it's very hard sometimes to get a high performer to self-assess their own symptoms or things that are going wrong or starting to kind of play a role in their health and wellness because they're so ingrained with that push forward mentality, right? And they need that. It's important. That's what gets them, you know, their daily habits done. That's what causes those controllables and those non-negotiables to happen every single day. So that part can be challenging. But I think that one of the things we see the most is just overtraining. We see overtraining and not truly understanding what their body needs, not necessarily overtraining in the capacity that they're harming themselves overall. It's just when you have a clear understanding of where you're at metabolically and what's working for you in that moment, what season of metabolic life you're in, then you're able to kind of shift and train everything the way it needs to be handled. And, I always say you don't know what you don't know. And so you could be training one way, recovering one way, fueling one way, but that might not be what your body needs in that moment. Okay. It might be completely fine, just like no food is inherently bad, unless it's, of course, something that's refined or processed or things like that. However, there are foods that maybe might not be best for you in this current metabolic landscape. So we kind of think that when we're talking about high performers, we see overtraining, we see even under eating, even though y'all, very focused on macros and things like that. Sometimes it's under eating in certain areas that you need to heal. Okay, it's not maybe necessarily in the overall picture. Definitely sleep, definitely overstimulation for
Fired,
overachievers.
fired, baby.
For sure, like 100%. And I'm not just talking about like energy drinks and caffeine and things like that. I'm just talking about what your body, the process your body goes through when you are like getting up in the morning and you're immediately rising your cortisol because you are like, it's time to hit it. It's time to get busy.
Yeah.
And then what that does throughout the day, even good habits can be stressful on the body, and you have to allow the body, you have to meet the body where it's at. If you want the ROI from it, you have to number one, understand it. And then you have to put things in place that support it wherever it's at.
Yeah. No, that hits home so deeply with me because it's interesting. our conversation, actually, this was the podcast that is going to come out right before this, is you and I had the lab conversation, and it
Yeah.
was okay, like
Yeah.
prioritize yourself better. And then I had Zach and Christina on the podcast, and
Yeah.
their inspiration through their small little habits that
Yeah.
took care of them better. It
Yeah.
was just like the my two worlds collided.
Mm.
And it's interesting, and this is me kind of processing through a thought out loud, so bear with me for a little bit.
Yeah.
But it gave me the realization of, yes, I quote unquote from outwardly take care of myself. I work out, I walk, I feel decently well, not as probably great and consistent as I needed to, but outwardly, and I don't want to compare myself, but comparatively to the average population, I prioritize myself better, right?
Yeah.
However, if I really looked at the details and what I needed for me, especially coming off of the 100 and high rocks and everything,
Mm.
I wasn't truly taking care of myself very well.
100. Yeah.
And that looked like giving myself the time to ask myself, Kels, how do you feel? And getting
Yeah.
awareness with that. How are you taking time to actually feel consistently instead of being on meetings all day? Taking the time to fuel throughout the day, or taking the time to hit a yoga session on a Sunday versus just doing another workout, right? And that has been, I don't think you understand how transformative for me that has been through what you've shared with me,
Yeah.
because it gave me that mirror of, oh, there is some really exciting details that I can give back to myself more. And even the frame of me doing it for myself is different than just trying to achieve a goal. Does that make sense?
That makes so much sense because I always, it's funny because I've always worked with my patients in a very specific capacity. Like when you're trying to get someone to achieve a goal, okay, and we work with our coaches the same way. When you're trying to achieve a goal and you're helping someone to achieve it, if you go at them and you say, "This is what I expect. This is the expectation. This is what you have to do. You have to hit these macros. You have to go to the gym this amount of times. This is your training schedule." It hits different in the brain than
Hmm.
if you tell them to shift their narrative to themselves. I no longer don't go to the gym, I no longer
Yeah.
eat that way. I no longer get less than 8 hours of sleep because what that does in the brain is it tells the brain this was something you chose.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that someone imparted on you. It's not an expectation. We all have expectations put on us all day, every day. One more expectation, sometimes hard to swallow, but when you get control of it, it feels different. It just hits a little different. And so I think sometimes changing that narrative to yourself kind of gives you that permission to show up differently. And so I've always loved that thought process of framing it that way because I think there's a lot of power in that. People sometimes when it's their idea, it's just better, it's just
They feel like
better.
that. Yeah. And I want to share too, you talked about high performance a lot.
Yeah.
And I know many people can hear that and be like, oh, either I'm not a high performer or I am. If you are listening to this podcast,
Oh,
you are in some capacity a high performer,
yes.
because we talk so much about growth here. And that is just kind of the audience that we attract. So I want people that are listening to this, all of this pertains to you, even if you don't have an identity yet of being a high performer, you are, because
Right.
listen to this. No, that's good, Chris. And what you shared about at the end, you said like I no longer XYZ, or I'm somebody that takes care of myself. And that's very much an identity shift,
Mhm.
its deepest core level.
So much so.
And I know for me, and I'm going to flip this back on you, even embodying over the past 2 to 3 weeks, is I am somebody that takes care of myself incredibly
Yeah.
well. And
Yeah.
just having that awareness has brought me to the habits that align with that. And so my question through that is, have you always been somebody that has embodied that identity of I take care of myself and I do things that are in alignment with me? Or has that been something that you've learned over time to be able to get to this badass Chris that we're hearing and understanding now?
100% no. Like I was not always this version of myself. And that really truly is the core of what we'll end up talking about with Life Visions. And I think that really, when you made the comment to people who may not kind of identify as a high performer, you have to first see yourself as a high performer before you actually achieve that high performance. So you have to actually believe that that's who you are and that's what you deserve and that's kind of what you're going to create. And then you take steps to get there. And so, yes, every single person can decide today, I am a high performer. You don't have to actually be that yet. And we'll kind of dive into that. I had a definite progression, to this place that I'm standing in today. And it's one that profoundly changed my life, the trajectory of it, the emotions of it, every single thing was affected by my ability to do that, my ability to make that shift. So, yeah, so it's definitely possible for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. If you don't mind, you don't have to share all the details of it, but I know there's many women listening to this, all ages, that are the people that necessarily don't take care of themselves. They check things off the box. They are giving to a lot of people around them, but they haven't
Yeah.
necessarily taken care of themselves, even me, to the capacity because they are serving so much externally or doing things externally. So through your experience, what has been that journey, or what was the click that happened or the shift that happened that has led to now you taking care of you?
I think, and I shared with you, a little bit about my story, and I won't go into too much depth. I think
Right.
that's another podcast, but I think where I think a lot of women find themselves specifically, which is, most women have servants' hearts, and most women actually put themselves on the back burner. I think it's very natural because we're the caretakers of other people around us and things like that. Where I was at my season of life, I was in a 20-year marriage. I had children. I was living this life that wasn't serving me. It was actually serving everyone around me. And I was just kind of like this passenger in my life. And I think that what had to shift and what shifted really, it was a series of things that started happening. I always ate well. I always would work out or move or those types of things, but it wasn't with intention. And I think a lot of people get stuck in that pattern of, I'm doing these things. I'm, going to yoga. I'm going and doing a Pilates class. I'm eating great food. I'm prepping my meals or doing all these. I'm working on my mindset. I'm reading the book. I'm listening to the podcast, but there's not really any intention behind it. It's like, we're doing it because that's what we've either been told to do, it's expected of us, or we know that's what other successful people do, but there isn't like a plan in place. There's no vision for where to go. And I think that's what happened for me was I just realized number one, if I had to share one kind of piece of advice to myself 20 years ago, if I could go back to that, I would say you deserve to experience life exactly the way you want to.
Mm.
Exactly. I don't have to water it down for someone. I don't have to not shoot too high. And I believe that that was probably the biggest shift that happened for me and allowed me to start kind of stepping into a place where I looked at my life. I kind of took a step back, looked at my life and said, yeah, this is not what I want. Like I'm
Mm.
doing this for everyone else, all the people that I love, all the people that love me. I'm supporting them, but no one is supporting me, and what I want, my goals, my body, my health, my wellness. So I would say that was probably the biggest thing for me that
Yeah.
started that shift.
Yeah. And it sounds like that you gave yourself permission to think differently or take that kind of 40-foot view and look at your life. And it's not that, oh my gosh, I'm stuck here.
Yeah,
Wait, allow myself to dream again. And we don't need permission, but I think sometimes we wait for that permission of, okay, now it's your time, Kelsey, or now it's your
yeah.
time, Chris. And it sounds like that was the shift of giving yourself permission to dream again. Is that?
Yeah, it was definitely that, but I think like the phrase I've always come back to through this, through this time of kind of evolving and stepping into this version of myself, which by the way is my favorite freaking version. It's like it's the version I was always supposed to be, is that I allowed myself to be selfish
Mm,
without guilt.
mm,
I mean, truly, that's what I allowed myself to do. And I think women put a lot of guilt on themselves if they put any focus back on themselves. It feels selfish. It feels like in that season of my life, I had children, they were young. My husband at the time traveled 80% of the time, had a big job. And I just took care of everything. I just did all the things. I ran to all the club sports. I did all the mom things, and I lost myself and finally allowing myself to be selfish and to say it's not selfish to have a non-negotiable of, this, or to make sure that I'm pouring back into myself here, because that's really how you make impact in other people's lives. That's how you impact everything that you're saying you're doing, you're not focusing on yourself because of.
Right.
And I think it's an excuse. I learned that for myself, that I was using that as an excuse a lot of the times, for sure.
And you talked a little bit ago about intention. Like you were doing the things, but
Yeah.
you weren't necessarily as intentional with it. So can you share what that difference was?
Yeah. So, I think there's a difference between expectation and intention. And I think and I'll just speak for me, my season of life at that time was I was expected to have, have the perfect children. And I was expected to make sure they were in these sports club groups. And I was expected to make sure that I was room mom and expected to, like, I had all these expectations on me. I was expected to be this type of wife, expected to be this type of friend. And when you do that, it's very much like what we talked about earlier. When someone is telling you what to do, you have a harder time swallowing it. It gets, it starts to pile up, and that too builds toxicity in the body.
Mm,
But I think when you're intentional about something, when you're doing something with intention and there's intention behind it, there's desire behind it. There's reason behind it. So, like, if I was intentionally doing something, I would know why I was doing it. It
mm,
wouldn't just be something that I was like mindlessly doing because this is what all the other moms were doing, or all the other wives in my community were doing, or those types of things. So when I say intention, I truly do believe, and I'll kind of tie this to life visions a little bit when we start kind of diving into that. Emotions, it's tied to emotions. Intention has to be tied to the emotions you feel around an activity. And I think that's probably the biggest piece of that.
Yeah. No, it's said beautifully because, I mean, we hear the word intentional, be intentional all the time, but it can be one of those words that we don't truly understand what it means or how
Right.
to live it out. And it aligns with what you talk through life, which is a lot of like creating your life by design.
Yes.
And to be able to do that, there has to be intentions about why you're doing to go
Yeah.
after that life by design. So can you talk to me about creating life by design and what
Yeah.
you've really embodied with that?
Yeah, and a little fun side note, my husband and I, created Life Visions here in Cabo, actually. We were on vacation and we just were so in love with our life and what we had created, since each of us had our story of kind of breaking away and really designing and believing we deserved a different type of life. And so that's really where it was born. And really the way that we kind of attached it, to our own kind of signature story, was that we were using creating and designing a life visions, to leverage how we wanted to experience life in this season. And the great thing about creating and designing a life vision is that you can do it multiple times. So, like, I'm 47. The life design that I'm designing now is much different than if I had started designing a life vision at 20. Okay. And you can design and redesign and reconstruct and all of this, your life vision, as many times as needed. And that's what I think is really important, is you don't have to like decide this is what you want for your life, plan out the next 40 years, and that's the end goal. It can change and ebb and flow as many times, because the great thing about leveling up and continuing to grow is that opportunities will come and manifestations will happen. And, the maker puts these things in your path and says, here, as a reward or as promised, here's this for you. And it opens up, even more capacity. So, I think that when you're talking about designing a life vision, you have to create signature emotions that are tied to your life vision in that moment.
Mm,
And emotions are going to change all the time. So the way that we looked at it was, we're designing our life vision right now. What emotions are tied
mm,
to when we obtain the things we've just designed? Like,
mm,
when you're sitting down and you're saying, my life vision for the next 10 years is this. That's one piece of it. Okay. That's like creating a vision board. All right. But you have to take it a step deeper. You have to actually tie emotion to it. And that's the intention. So
mm,
when you can take the emotions that you would feel when you experience this, or when you obtain this, or when you manifest this, that's where the magic happens. Okay. Because now it's an emotion. Now there's a tension behind it. And then, we kind of take it one step deeper when we talk about, just how the best version of yourself is kind of the vision you design. All right. Because what that allows you to do is, and for us, we've seen this time and time and time again, it opens up capacity. It opens up capacity in your life to service and impact others, to have wealth, to have health, in your relationships, in contribution that you're able to give back, and definitely in self-development. So
Yeah.
when you're able to look at it that way, I mean, it's completely game changer, like completely game changer for sure.
Yeah. It's funny. Well, not funny. I think God designs things for a reason and he puts things in certain order. We had our book club last night and we're going over the book The Mountain Is You.
Yeah,
And we're in, I think, chapter 3. And we were talking a lot about how you can look at it from a non-faith lens if that's not your jam. I tend to look at things from a faith lens because that's
yeah,
my roots, my foundation. But we were talking a lot about how God will place certain desires in your heart for a reason.
mhm,
And for you to ignore those desires is at the end of the day ignoring what he
right.
put in you, And I, for the longest time, this was just a frame switch for me was like, okay, like what's, my vision and all of that, which I think is incredibly helpful. And
Yeah,
when I started to combine these two aspects, it was like the game changer. It was number one, God, what desires do you have for me? And allow me to fulfill what that vision for my life
yes,
is through you. And also knowing, 'cause there's twofold to this, and also knowing that the desires that God placed in your heart, it's not selfish to want to pursue them
yeah,
as you have both coming through and working within you. It was so anyway, so that was a big part of it. And also we talked a lot about the subconscious mind and how that has so much to do with your trajectory, and it operates in emotion and pictures. It doesn't operate in words. And so what
exactly.
you shared there a lot about attaching the emotions to what that
Mhm.
vision for you, like everything is combining together. So it's so fascinating when you start to dig into it.
Yeah, and I mean, we talk a lot about, because emotion is such a big piece for us, and when we work with women to create life visions for themselves, or even big groups, we do this a lot with married couples, or people, whether they're newlyweds or things like this, because now they're coming together and they're able to create. You have to have your life vision separately. It's very important to have your individual kind of, vision, but now you're having to think about what your life looks like now, and how that kind of feeds in and how to support each other and things of that nature. But I think when you talk about emotion and tying it to that life vision, then you have to create what we kind of call our signature, emotions, and those emotions become your kind of dream frequency, and I too, because I operate from more of a faith-based, it sometimes is questioned when we talk about vibration and frequency and things like that. I don't look at it the same. I don't think that there has to be an either or. I believe that
Amen,
the
sister. Amen. I get it. I get it.
yes, and so I don't live in those limitations, in those walls. So I think when we're talking about creating those emotions, that's where that it becomes so powerful, and you're able to then change the entire course of your life by creating those emotions, because you're actually looking at life differently. And I think when we're talking about women specifically, for women, we're driven by our emotions. Okay. We hear it all the time, and it's always actually brought as such a negative, which I've always had a really hard time with that, because I'm like, I think there's a reason the maker made us that way, because we have children and we support and we nurture and we do all of these things. And I think that those are actually our strengths. And I think that, a lot of women tether their self-worth to their life experiences. So when we're talking about a life vision and things of that nature, a lot of times women specifically have a difficult time kind of looking at that because of the way they feel about themselves. Their self-worth has been so tied to their life experiences. And this starts when we're young, then it goes into our friendships, our relationships that we have, marriage, children, all of these things. And I think that when you can shift that mindset and you can start to have more control, and be able to believe that you can design your life, then that self-worth starts to shift. And that's what then feeds every other habit and every other decision that kind of comes down the line after, which is, really, really powerful.
Yeah, I'm experiencing that literally right now to a T.
I
And
love it.
it's not that I forgot how to dream because I'm very
Yeah.
much with the vision of the business and everything. But once again, after Zach and Christina and your conversation, it was just the beautiful combination of it all. It was like, man, I really haven't stepped back to reevaluate what that vision is for me.
Yeah.
And am I aligned in these areas? And personally and professionally, I tend to have a tendency to do it professionally really
Yeah.
well.
Always. Yeah.
Personally, it can feel like I'm on the train, but I'm not like I'm not really clear about where that train is going.
Right.
And we talked about this a few podcasts ago, but clarity creates an ease in decision making. And when you're clear about where you want to head, your no's are no's and your yes are yeses,
Yeah.
and it takes a lot of the quote unquote stress out of certain doors that close or certain doors that open because you're clear about where you're going. And there's honestly too less comparison because you're not worried about other people because of what desires that you have that you're pursuing. So
Right.
I just love the conversation of clarity because I think that that's what even myself at times have lacked, but what a lot of people lack. And so there's so much stress or weight on their
Yes.
life because of that.
Yes. Yes, I agree. And I think, whenever you can, I mean, you talked a lot about clarity. And I think that having even taking it deeper and having those emotions tied to that clarity,
Mhm.
that really makes it super easy to then say, okay, these are my signature emotions. I've taken my life vision. This is where I'm going. I've created the emotions, my signature emotions about how I will feel when I obtain these things. Now that leads everything. Basically, everything I do in a day, every relationship I have, every book I read, every food I take in, everything I do now can be taken back to those emotions. You can now say, how do I feel when I'm doing this task? How do I feel when I'm doing this habit? And honestly, if it doesn't make you feel the way you set up your signature emotions tied to your life vision, it's not for you. All right,
Mhm.
you're chasing the wrong thing because
Mhm.
those emotions make it super easy to just say how I experience every day is now ran by my life vision, by my design,
Mhm.
and how I want to feel in this life, how I want to experience it. And I
Mhm.
think that's something that definitely my husband and I live by is when we're trying to decide, do we take on this new project? Do we start to work in this capacity? Or even people that we meet, we're again later in life, not later in life, we're not old, but
Sure, you still
I mean,
got a lot of life to live,
feels
baby.
really old. But even when we're meeting new people, we moved to Cabo a year ago, and we're obviously meeting a new, completely different kind of friend group, community, that kind of thing. And we're really picky now about who we let into our space because it's so important to protect your life vision and how you want to experience life. And I don't think that people understand how detrimental it can be to where you're going if you don't protect every single thing kind of in your world,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so it runs our life because we've chose it. We designed it. This is exactly what we wanted. And it makes it really simple, makes it super simple.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing you say too is we'll pull back the intentionality piece of it is that you do things that are intentional with where you want to go. And I
Yes.
would love to hear your perspective on this because I'm going to give my kind of 2 cents in is when you are clear about where you're headed in that vision, for me, even to this day, sometimes I don't want to go work out because I'd rather just chill. But because my intention is so clear about where I want to go, it doesn't mean that, at least my opinion, doesn't mean every single moment you're just going to experience bliss 24/7. You're never going to have a
Right.
challenge or curveball. However, your intentionality behind it in what I've experienced has shifted a little bit more of the excitement level towards it. And it's not that I'm saying, oh, one day I don't want to go work out. Oh my God, is my vision screwed up? No, you're
Right.
still going to experience the range of
Of course.
emotions.
Yes.
However, that intentionality has shifted a lot. And it's not like I'm just dragging myself every single day. It's like, no, no, I'm clear where I'm headed. These are the things that are aligned with that. And so I don't expect myself to feel on top of the world every single day, but
No.
majority of times because I'm aligned, I'll be excited to go after the thing,
Yeah.
even if in the moment it's not necessarily.
Well,
Let's
and that alignment, yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about. That alignment with your life vision is exactly it compounds and compounds and
yeah.
compounds and compounds. And you made the statement, it was beautifully said that, just because you choose not to do something that doesn't get you closer doesn't necessarily mean that was the bad thing. And that's why emotions come into it so beautifully, is because if you're deciding one day, man, I just don't feel motivated to go. Sit in that emotion for a minute, and, that emotion that you're feeling, that not wanting to go, does that somehow still fuel your life vision?
Mhm.
Maybe that's your body telling you you need to rest. Maybe that's your body saying, hey, I'm overworked. I need some down regulation. You know, those are very good practices. And I think that's why we like tying it to emotions is because they're as long as I mean, you're the driver of your life by design. So if you're okay with it, if you can like, because what tends to happen is if you don't go to the gym, if you were to really sit in that for many days, then you'd start feeling what? Guilty, lethargic, unmotivated, like disappointed. And those emotions aren't congruent with your life vision.
Right.
But one day of deciding, you know what? I'm gonna stay home and I'm gonna listen to a podcast or I'm gonna really just allow myself to just be, you
Mhm.
know, and maybe I'm gonna spend some time, you know, just going inward and kind of just focusing on myself. Those are still very good emotions tied to you reaching your goals. Okay. And I think it's important to know the difference. We would never say, if you're not going to go to the gym, that's what you said you were going to do. And, you know, period, that's you're thrown off. So I think it was good that you kind of made that discernment of, you know, sometimes it's important to sit with the emotion for a minute and see how it fits in, you
Yeah.
know, because your body is very smart and it will tell you what you need to do for sure.
Mhm. I mean, it's understanding yourself better because what I
Yeah.
don't want people to hear from this is saying, "Oh my gosh, if I wake up and I don't want to go, that means oh my, I like everything's out of alignment." And it's like, no, no, no. Like sometimes that can just be an emotion that's fleeting, and we just can't drive every action from our emotions. However, this is just where the self-awareness comes in of, okay, is this just a, hey, I need to pause and take a moment or take a day to chill, or hey, you know what, no, I made a commitment, I'm going to say it. And it just takes so much self-awareness about yourself to understand what then action to take in alignment with it. That's the growth process at the end of the day.
100%. And I think the more you do, the more you take these types of steps,
Yeah.
that's when you actually do have that awareness and the power, like it becomes very powerful because you feel more in control of your life instead of it just kind of happening to you. And then you don't really fall into those patterns as often of if I didn't do something that is always my daily, I'm beating myself up. Those are very negative emotions. And
Mhm.
so, you know, I think the more power, clarity, you know, kind of intention you put behind things, you are going to be able to tell when this emotion is tied to, this is what I need to listen to, or if it's an emotion that doesn't serve. So I think it's, you know, that is a process of becoming more aware. It's a practice that has to keep taking place, you know, and we always talk about wellness being you know it's definitely not a destination, it's a journey. You know, you're never going to as we age, we're always going to have a new place to start being, you know, proactive about or these types of things. I think the same goes for what you can achieve. No one wants to plan a life and say they can't go any further than that. You
Mhm.
know, it's always going to be ebbing and flowing, and as you grow, we hope it does. You know, that's the point. That's how more impact is made. That's how more contribution is made. That's how we serve more people. So, you
Yeah.
know, it's definitely a process for sure.
I'm gonna I'm gonna say one more thing. I'm gonna pull us out into the 40-foot thousand view to then get very actionable because I think that there's so much gold through this that not giving some steps will be disservice to them. But what I initially heard you say there was allowing growth to come from a place of loving yourself.
Yes.
And I care about myself so much to make these changes than from a place of shame or guilt or just negativity at the end of the day. And I mean, there is a moving away from pain towards pleasure, but just really self-analyzing. Okay, am I making these changes because I'm so shaming myself into doing this? Probably not going to serve you in the
Right.
long run.
Right.
Or are you shifting to say, I care about myself too much to allow myself to keep doing these things that don't serve me or to not do these things that do serve me, which is
Yes.
gold.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And I think you know, I think some of the first things you have to do anytime you start to kind of like set out on a elevation of self
Yeah.
is that first of all, you have to, like I said earlier, you have to allow yourself to be a little bit selfish
Mhm.
because you need space, you need time away from your daily to sit with how you feel about yourself, who you are, where you're going, what disappointments do you have, all of these things that are keeping you kind of stuck Or maybe you're not stuck, but maybe you're not meeting your full potential, or maybe you have more you want to achieve. I think that's such an important step, is really allowing yourself that space without guilt. Okay. And then understanding that just because you do that, nothing else is falling away. Nothing, no one else is suffering. You are just as worthy of attention and focus and time and care as anyone else in your life, and then protecting that vision
Mhm.
unapologetically. Whatever that vision that you create is, whatever you want for yourself, whatever you want to start putting in place or planning ahead for or starting to design, you have to protect that
Mhm.
like it is just like your most precious thing,
Mhm.
because there is so much power in understanding that when you are your best version, you get to give that back to others. You are the best version of yourself for others. Right now, in your current version, if you don't feel 100% great, 100% focused, 100% like you know where you're going and you're excited about getting there, you're only giving a portion of yourself to people. And what else could you be achieving? How else could you make impact?
Mhm.
And, those are my top two things, not being selfish, not feeling guilty in that capacity, and then protecting that vision, that design unapologetically. I don't enter into these types of relationships that don't serve me because of this. I have standards. I'm protecting my energy. I have things I want to focus on, and doing that in every capacity of your life for sure.
Man. Okay. I'm going to pull us out because this is gold. So, initially in this podcast, we talked about hormones, optimization. We didn't go crazy deep dive, which
Yeah.
I imagine we're probably going to do another podcast and nerd all out about that because if people that are listening are interested, shoot Krista or myself a message and we will do another podcast all about that. But we talked initially about that, and then we went into more of like creating life by design and giving yourself permission to dream and to go after that, right? So, knowing that those are our two themes, what is one or two
Mhm.
actionable steps from a health optimization, from a metabolic functionality standpoint that people can implement that will help them along that trajectory?
Oof. Well, I mean, as far as metabolics go, um, I, I mean, I'm going to say it. It's got to start this way. I'm going to say test. I'm going to say test, because you can't work on something you don't even know what you're working on. But then I think, the heavy hitters, like for liver, we want clean hydration. We want to make sure that we're sweating, get in the sauna, move. If you're not already moving, most of you likely are, but we definitely want to focus on making sure that if there are, and the reason I start with testing is because you can't support a system that you don't know how to support it.
Yeah.
So for me to say support liver as a metabolic function, but we don't know how to support it or what we're supporting, maybe it doesn't need support, these types of things. There may be things that you can do to help detox pathways to be more open and not congested. I think the biggest thing that I want to say about the liver, because I always talk about how it's the most important piece to our such an important organ. The burden that is placed on the liver and the jobs that it has to do, over 500 jobs that the liver does in the body. It's ridiculous. And the things that you're really needing to focus on when we're talking about the liver is going to be the fact that if it's congested, we talked about hormones. When it's congested and it can't clear hormones, we
Mhm.
see that hormones stay active for too long. Okay. Then we're looking at estrogen dominance. We're looking at androgen levels that start to fail. All of these things start happening. We look at blood sugar starting to kind of down regulate. We see poor thyroid conversion. We see fatigue, brain fog, all of these things. So again, testing, focusing on the liver, blood sugar for you high performers, for anyone, but for you high performers that don't think you could have a blood sugar issue, you actually could have a blood sugar issue far more than someone who, has poor daily habits or taking in nutritional, kind of disaster makers. We want to know where our blood sugar is because it plays such an important part.
Mhm.
And I think that that's probably one of the big things. Overtraining, focusing on making sure that you're recovering like it's your job. Like literally,
Mhm.
if you are in the gym 4, 5, 6 times a week and you are high intensity, do your body a favor, man. You're asking it for so much. You're asking it for just such a big ROI. And if the metabolic is a bit inflexible, if we have dysfunction, it can't keep up. And then you just keep piling it on. So I would say testing, focusing on the big hitters, sleep. We want to make sure that we're down regulating our nervous system, that we're making sure that we're getting that mindset time, that we're watching our blood sugar, feeding and fueling properly. Those are probably the big ones for sure. Making sure we're building up the antioxidants in the body for that cellular repair, mitochondrial health, that kind of thing. We don't want that low grade systemic inflammation that comes from oxidative stress that we see so much in athletes, high performers, those who are really working hard in the gym. Those would be my big ones.
I take it back. I don't care if anybody messages me or you. I'm gonna have you on for my selfish desire of rabbit holing this.
Yes, let's
We're
do
gonna
it.
schedule another one.
Let's
No,
do it. There's so much to unpack, so
there
much.
is. There is. Okay, that's great. Test, don't guess, test. And
Yes,
I
yes,
can secondly say that it was eye-opening for me. I knew I felt a little bit off, but it was incredibly eye-opening to see the data. And I'm telling you, data will
yeah,
drive your decisions, and it has drove my decisions to be better for me. Anyway,
yeah.
secondly was the vision, was creation, was alignment, right? For that woman that's out there, because I know there's at least one that's like, what she says sounds amazing. But I
Yeah.
am that Krista 20 years ago
Yeah.
that where the heck do I start? What
Yeah.
would you tell her from a baby step in the right direction?
Lean into your emotions because that's our superpower. I mean, it truly, truly is. And I think that when you can, it's such a small, small step, leaning into your emotions, allowing yourself to feel them instead of pushing them away because you find them, a weakness or you've been told they're a weakness. Why are you so emotional? These types of things. Our emotions tell us something isn't right, or they tell us something's great, right? But the emotions are there for a reason. If you're waking up every day and your emotions are keeping you in this place that you're like, I'm not in love with my life. I'm not in love with myself. I'm not in love with my body. I'm not in love with my mind and how I can't think. I have brain fog, all of these different things. I'm not in love with what I've achieved. That can all change. It can all change. Okay, because the power is definitely inside of you to do that. And it really is just one simple thing. It's a choice. It's a choice to say, I deserve it. I'm going to sit in these emotions and then I'm going to really write down, make a list. What is it that you want? What is missing from your life? If you could have anything, dream as big as possible. If you, there are no, sky is the limit. I want you to write it down, like on paper, on 5 pieces of paper. It doesn't matter. That's got to be the first step because just like we talked about data drives direction, we can't go somewhere we don't know where we're going. Okay. And so you've got to know what it is you're unhappy about. You have to know what it is you even want to try to achieve or what it is you want to change. Then you can start tying those emotions. If I had this list of things, if I had all of these things, how would I feel? And I want you to get really pinpointed. Like, I don't want you to say, if I had this entire 5 pages of life visions, how would I feel? I'd feel happy. I'd feel successful. No, I want you to say, how would I feel if I felt sexy in my body? Okay. If I felt like I didn't have low libido and I could spend time with my husband and not feel a certain way about myself, what emotion would be tied to that? How would you feel? You'd feel powerful. You'd feel strong. You feel all of these different things. Okay. I want you to really put an emotion behind each little task, like each little thing that you want to achieve. And then there's more work to do, which we'll do on another podcast. That's just one little start of what you do. And then that's how you start to design it. We have to start with a blueprint, right? You got to have like the foundation. You got to have exactly what's going to happen and how it's going to lay out. And then we start building in those habits. And then we start building in those daily things that have to happen, and how we have to look at life differently, how we have to take stock and audit of our life constantly to achieve those things. So that would probably be that'd be my starting place. That's an important part.
I was going to share this with you offline, but I'll just share it online. Is I know now exactly why God brought us together, and I'm going to honor your time. I'm going to wrap it up in a couple minutes here. Is you shared in that, hey, what is your dream? Like, if you could write it down,
Yeah.
what would that be? And taking reality, taking everything out of it. That is, Chris, that literally the exact same question I ask so many people.
Yeah.
and I want to really see you is we can speak from a place of book knowledge,
Yeah.
which can be helpful, right?
Yeah.
And or we can speak from a place of living it. And
Yeah.
you have and continually do live it, which ooh, I got goosebumps even thinking about it. And it's interesting with what we do at Expand. It's like we try to break beliefs, but
Mhm.
this is that next level conversation of yes, you broke a belief of what's possible.
Yeah.
Now let's create that next level. And it's like, I don't know, I can just see it's like that ascension piece of it. So just thank you for being the person that you are. I am incredibly inspired by you and grateful that we've been in each other's lives and continue will
Yes.
grow in it. But for those that are listening, where can they find you at if they're curious about hormones or the life visions? Like, what is that
Yeah.
next step for people? Because I know that they're going to want it.
So I think the next step right now, it's funny, and I have to say this because you just said, you said something earlier because it's there are just moments that happen so organically, and this I think is one of them. I shared with you, a few months ago that my soul, my heart, is right here in this piece that we've talked about, my story, how I have kind of evolved, over this last 10 years, and being able to share this in this capacity, it opens me up to be able to impact others. I am actually achieving part of my life vision, and that is so incredibly empowering to me. I'm so excited about it. I can't wait to dive in with your community and people that need to hear my story, because there was a time where who I am today, sitting here sharing these things, it did not seem possible. And I can't wait to go deeper into that and really share my heart and my story. And so I'm so grateful for the opportunity. We are actually redoing our website right now. So probably the best thing will be ready next week, and then you'll be able to just go to lifevisions.com. But what I would say is, for now, if you have questions, if you want to start this process, if you have any questions at all, Christa Shepherd at experiencelifevisions.com. That's my email. And you can reach me there, but you can also just you can reach out to Kelsey. She knows how to get
Oh,
a
I'll
hold
hook
of
you
me.
up.
And I would just love to speak with anybody that has any questions about, the clinical metabolic stuff, or just anything about creating a life vision. Yeah, I mean, just wow, so excited to be here today.
I'm excited. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you for being a part of this.
You're so
I will
welcome.
put all of that in the show notes. The crew knows where to. And I challenge a lot our crew this, not every podcast, but especially in this one, is what is that one thing that they're taking away? And I
Yeah.
want you to email Krista that, or if you don't have email, even though it's 2025 or whatever that looks like, message me and I'll get this to her because it is incredibly impactful for somebody that has lived this, that it experiences this or talks about it outwardly. Hey, what has been the game changer for you?
Yeah.
So email her, message me. Krista, thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I'm just so excited for what's in store in the future.
Same girl, same. Thank you so much for having me. I've truly, truly enjoyed it. It's perfect start to my day for sure.
And an end to my day because we're at
I
different
know.
times.
We're in different time zones.
All right, crew. Thank you so much for popping on. I will see you soon. And once again, take one thing from this podcast, live it out this week, and keep seeking the edge. Love you guys.